Hello everyone, and welcome to another Thomas Wooden Railway review video. In this video I am taking a look at the 70th anniversary Thomas the Tank Engine 2-pack. I'm pretty sure that it does have a proper name, and if it does, it'll be in the title of this video, as well as, well, the intro of the video. So there's that to go by, but at the time that I'm recording, I have totally forgotten what this 2-pack is officially called, so my apologies. This is a 2-pack that came out in 2015 for the 70th anniversary of Thomas the Tank Engine. And it just so happens that next year, it's going to be the 75th anniversary, so I am expecting that they are going to do something major for that. I don't know what, but we'll just have to see. So, in this 2-pack, we have two versions of Thomas. This one right here is the original version of Thomas, or a replica of the original version of Thomas, and I will get into more detail about that in a bit. And then we also have this special edition Thomas, which is basically the same as what Thomas is known by today, except he has a gold funnel, a gold front of the boiler, gold magnets, and some gold wheels. So now to look over each of these individually. So first we are taking a look at the model of Thomas that's supposed to represent how he originally looked when he was first conceived of. And underneath him he says Thomas 1942, which happens to be the year that Thomas was actually thought up of, or thought by, whatever. So pretty much the whole idea is that in the creation of this Thomas, it was a result of the Reverend W. Awdry just taking a sort of broom and just creating that into a train, and it looked something like this. You can see that Thomas is in a much darker blue than he normally is in. And it kind of looks a bit like the LBSC Thomas that was shown in The Adventure Begins. And speaking of which, I do happen to have my custom LBSC Thomas. You know, it would have been good to have gotten something like this as the anniversary rather than something like this. I mean, this is still good, but I think that this is probably be what I would want. And you can see quite a load of difference between the two versions of the character. This one is much longer in comparison, since he happens to have the cab, and his number 1 is over at the back of his cab instead of in the center right here, and he did not have the N and W on the modern version. And as far as I know, the number 1 was added because it was very easy to draw, and that's basically what led to the engines having numbers. Of course, Thomas was the only engine to have a number at first in the Railway series, but in the TV series, at least with The Adventure Begins, there were already 5 engines that had numbers already, and Thomas was the new number 1 engine after Glenn was, well, at the moment put in the siding. But of course, if you've seen the Christmas Coffee Pot episode, you know that Glenn was later restored. But for quite some time, he was just in that siding, just rusting up, and Thomas basically had taken his place. While having this Thomas is good and all, and how it can pretty much function just about the same as any other wooden railway train in all sorts of forms, such as pushing and pulling trains, the problem here, well, there's actually 2 problems with this train. Well, 3 actually. Problem number 1. He can't really go through very tight bends. So, like when he goes through very tight bends, he will very often, you know, kind of struggle when going through there. And even if you have, well, when I've done a test run with this thing, I've had him pulling some coaches, but as soon as he gets to some sort of a curve point like this, the coaches just detach. So they really did not do that good of a job at designing how this engine can go through. They probably could have just made it so that the chassis was like separated and just moved about on the bottom, much like with some of the longer tender engines. So that's one problem. Another problem is that he doesn't do so well going up hills, at least not on the 90s version of the wooden railway track. Maybe he would go up much better on, say, I guess not even on the updated version of the track really works out. I just now tested it out on track that actually is narrow gauge only, but for the purpose of this review, I tested it out to see if he would do any better, and apparently he does not. So you pretty much just have to try to just adjust around the fact that he cannot go up hills all that well. And another issue is that, yeah, you see his funnel is actually way too tall. Just a few tiny inches taller. I mean, what you could do is probably just shorten it down, like maybe if you had some sort of a cutting tool, you could probably shorten it down. I'm personally not going to be doing that because, you know, this is a very rare kind of train, and I would much rather not, you know, cut it down and kind of decrease its worth. So, now the cab, of course, can... Okay. I was gonna say the cab can actually go through tunnels, okay, but nope, it cannot. At least it cannot go through tunnels like this one, but pretty much, if you want to use this train on a train layout, as long as that layout does not feature any hills, tight bends, or tunnels, or anything that he can go under, then you're perfectly fine. But if you are using any of those things on a layout, this train is not going to work out so well on that layout, I am sorry to say. But, although it's meant to be played with, it pretty much does not do a job all that well. And is, just kind of a thing to have around to just kind of give fans a bit of a reminder or a little storytelling about how Thomas originally looked when he was first conceived of, or when he was made for the first time in history. So that is my look over the 1942 Thomas. Now let's go on to the other Thomas that is included in this 2-pack. Next, we are taking a look at the Thomas, which is called Thomas 2015, and this refers to the year that this 2-pack was released, which was in 2015, during the 70th anniversary of the Thomas the Tank Engine franchise. Oh yeah, 2015 was a great year for Thomas the Tank Engine. Having The Adventure Begins come out, having Soder's Legend of the Lost Treasure come out, it was just basically a good year with all those good feelings just coming in. And, just giving you a bit of a reminder of what was once good, and just giving that sort of nostalgic feel to fans out there. Not just with Thomas, but with some other things that happened during that year as well. So, now, this Thomas right here is much like a regular Thomas. I do happen to have a few Thomases for a bit of a comparison. Like, for starters, the LBSC Thomas, the custom one that I've done, was made from a 2010 version of Thomas, specifically the one that came in the King of the Railway set. This is the only version of Thomas in this style, a normal one, that I have, and I have customized it into the LBSC Thomas. So it's basically kind of the same thing, with the same sort of face, and the same length. and all that. Now, it also just so happens that he is a very light blue color. Kind of, kind of a more light sea green sort of color. Here is the 2000 version of Thomas, the one I think that came out in 2002. I'm not sure if it came out a little earlier than that, but just the Thomas that came out during that time. Yeah, you can see the color difference, that this one is much brighter than this one. And another difference would be how shiny the red lining as well as the number 1 is. Now, I'm sure that quite a lot of fans would have liked it better if the gold parts of this Thomas were actually very shiny and gold. Like, for example, the gold Thomas that we got for the 60th anniversary. But, it doesn't bother me all that much, but I'm sure that a lot of fans would have preferred to have a gold much like that one. But it probably would kind of raise the costs about, this sort of train right here, and probably would raise raise the price of this character, or raise the price of the 2-pack. But, that's just something to point out. Now, here we have both of these Thomases right here, and we are going to be doing a sort of kind of a comparison note with a couple other Thomases that I have. Now, I just so happen to have 3 other versions of Thomas. Of course, you've seen 2 of them already. And, they would include, let me actually put it right here. Here is the 2002 or the 2000s era, the 2000s era Thomas. The one that does not have the stripes on top, except I've used a marker to create stripes, but they're not all that good. There are some releases of this version of Thomas that do have the stripes on the top, but this one did not have them originally, because this was from the Paint and Play Thomas set. Yeah, in my opinion, that was probably not all that good to just get a Thomas that didn't have the stripes on the top. I mean, why would they even do that sort of thing? And then is the LBSC Thomas, which is basically the representation for 2010, but of course you've already seen this earlier on in the review video when I was comparing both of the Thomases. And then we are taking another comparison look at this. The Thomas & Friends Wood Thomas. Of course, the 2019 version where it is fully painted, and not the 2018 version where there was the exposed wood. Although, speaking of that part, just putting these two side by side, this kind of looks like it could be like an early version of the 2018 Thomas & Friends Wood trains, because any area that shows gold is almost the same color as the exposed wood. I mean, it's not exactly the same color, and obviously it's not in the same position as where you would get the exposed wood, because, because the boiler is in plastic and the wheels are in plastic as well. On the Wood Thomas, any area where there was exposed wood would pretty much be around, kind of the lining area. And the chassis was also not painted all the way. Well, actually not at all. But this one is. And, you pretty much would know all about the Thomas & Friends Wood. And I have to say, I think that it was great that they actually went ahead and had the models be fully painted, because they look so much better. But, obviously they're pretty much, the Thomas Wood Thomas is slightly shorter, because they've just decided to decrease the length of the train. But you know, that's obviously something that a lot of people who purchased Thomas Wooden Railway, as well as Thomas Wood, would have figured out. So yeah, it does make me wonder what we will get for the 75th anniversary, which will be coming up next year. Are we going to get a continuation to The Adventure Begins? Like maybe a special called The Adventure Continues? Of course, Mainland Studios already did a fan-made movie called The Adventure Continues, but do you think that we are going to get an official one? Do you think we may even get a special that could be another adaptation of a Railway series book, maybe not necessarily what followed after The Adventure Begins? Do you think there could be like some sort of a mega special, like something that we have not seen before? I'm not entirely sure what sort of special we could end up getting, especially considering that 2020 will be the 3rd year in Big World, Big Adventures, so I'm not sure what sort of special we could get involving that. But if we could get another special that was like The Adventure Begins, that would be pretty good. And, you know, it would also give us a good chance to see more of Edward and Henry, considering that they've been taken out of the Steam team. But if they were to do a continuation of The Adventure Begins, they would certainly have to have Edward and Henry be in there, because they were part of the Railway series story, and they were part of the first season of Thomas and Friends. So yeah, even if they're not part of the main cast of characters anymore, they're still very important if you are doing an adaptation of a Railway series story. So that's pretty much all I have to say in regards to these this 2-pack right here. I certainly hope that when 2020 comes around, we will get something very amazing just like this. You know, probably something in the Thomas Wood line. I'm not quite sure what sort of special thing we could get for that, but you know, considering that Thomas Wood is starting to improve, you just never know what they could bring. They may bring something amazing, or they may not bring anything amazing. It's pretty much just kind of hard to know what to expect at this point. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again next time.